In the news, going to be going over a few things which are going on in the world here. You know, we're all being played by the powers that be, meaning the globalist elite. I don't care if you call them the Illuminati or the Bilderbergers or whatever. They are nothing more than the Kenites. We're being played by them. First of all, our own government, the government of the United States of America, is bringing Islamic so-called refugees, quote unquote, into this nation, as well as Canada is, under the guise of humanitarianism. It's the humane thing to do. But really they are doing this because they know the majority of these so-called refugees are radicalized and are terrorists that hate us. They hate our way of life. They hate our freedoms. Most of all, they hate our predominant religion, Christianity, which to us is not a religion but a reality. And they, of the global elitists, know that with this influx, there will be trouble. There will be terrorist attacks. There will be strife. And our government does not take the time to check these people out before they allow them to come into our nation. What sense does that make from a national security standpoint? None. So then, if it makes no sense, and it goes against any sort of logical thought, that can only mean one thing. It means it is agenda. The rich Arabian oil-bearing countries and other Islamic nations won't even allow these people into their countries because they have more common sense than to allow terrorists into their nations to break the peace, to bomb things, and to kill people. Now, either that, or they, with the help of the Kenites, are sponsoring them to come here and make jihad, which is to say holy war against us, which they will most surely do. This is like taking a bunch of troublemaking gang thugs and putting them into a quiet, peaceful suburban neighborhood. How long do you think that there will be peace and quiet when they arrive? Not very long, I can assure you. And did you hear about all the students at Yale University who signed a petition to do away with the First Amendment to the Constitution? Now, first of all, they probably don't even know what the First Amendment to the Constitution is. But for those who don't know, it is the First Amendment to the Constitution which guarantees us the right of free speech, guarantees us freedom of speech. Why do you suppose they're doing this? Because they know it will lead to a domino effect, where they can slice the dice in the Constitution as they see fit. But when this happens, when freedom of speech is removed, who do you suppose will have their rights infringed upon? In other words, if this law is passed. It won't be liberals or progressives, I can assure you of that. So they will be allowed to speak, but those of the rest of us, conservatives and Christians, will not be allowed free speech. This goes to show what our colleges are doing to our youth. They are making them into simple-minded morons and buffoons which can't even wipe their own hind ends without instructions. I mean, duh. Hey, let's do away with the First Amendment to the Constitution. That seems like a wonderful thing to do. Again, this will cause a domino effect. You mess with one thing about the Constitution, you can mess with anything about the Constitution. And they've been trying to mess with a lot of it for years and have been. Right now, they're after Amendments 1 and 2. Over and over again, we see this happening. And you know what else we see? We see the results of what is happening in this country when career criminals are being released from prisons and being put back out onto our streets. People with rap sheets a mile long have been arrested over and over and over again. Some of them as many as 30 or 40 times. And our dumbass justice system still has not learned that this does not work. Or maybe they know it doesn't work and they're using this as an agenda. Because what happens when you release career criminals onto the street? Well, it guarantees violence. It guarantees that there will be violence and lawlessness. But then again, violence and lawlessness can be used as a tool to ban guns, to write new laws, to limit the freedoms of the law-abiding, and to do away with the Second Amendment. In other words, to ban guns and to declare martial law. I mean, just think what happens if there's lawlessness, buildings being burned, looting and pillaging. They can declare martial law. This is all part of making the criminals out to look like victims. Well, we're just going to release them. They didn't have a chance. You know, there's not enough brains in the liberal, progressive, socialist mind to fill a thimble to 1/8. Or either that, or they're much smarter than we think, and they're using this, again, as agenda. Now, as I alluded to earlier, we have seen what has happened in Europe and what is happening in other places when refugees are allowed into the country. I mean, look at the West End of Great Britain. Mostly Muslims now, where where British people hardly dare to set foot. Where they have roving bands of people enforcing Sharia law. We see all this happening. So our government's actions make no sense in bringing this about here. So there we go. What do we have? Agenda. And what happened just the other night? Well, in the middle of the night, they voted in the Pelosi-Ryan bill to spend $1.1 trillion on these so-called refugees, while at the same time our government is cutting Social Security for those who have paid into it for all these years, and leaving our veterans out in the cold, out in the streets, and without medical resources. Now, does this make any sense? And does it make any sense to spend $1.1 trillion on a bunch of foreigners when we are so neck deep in debt? No, it doesn't. So what does that tell you? It is agenda. Further, they stir up racial hatred any and every time they can. Every time a black man is shot by police or by a neighborhood watch or anything, whether the shooting is justified or whether it is not, it is still used as a tool to push progressive ideology and to forge new laws. Yet these same policymakers and the media say nothing when a black man kills 14 people in a terrorist-styled attack. And they say nothing when the Black Panthers go about in neighborhoods and march and patrol, the same way as the Muslims are doing, as alluded to over in Western Europe and in West London. But what if the same was done by Caucasians here? Well, then that would be racist. We would be stereotyping. what would we be doing out patrolling? We would be looking for a black man to kill or a Hispanic to kill. And people buy into the nonsense. Now, as we move on, as our brother Sam on Mark 13 Records reported several days ago, 195 nations have joined the UN resolution and banded together to fight against climate change. This, as they say, is the most imminent threat facing the world today, climate change. Really? Well, what, are you guys missing out on all the terrorist bombings and all the other things happening? How about the natural disasters? But nay. They say this is a common foe that we must unite against. Yes, this is the common foe they seek to unite all against to bring us into world government. Now, we know we're going into world government, but I guess we should still be apprised of these things, of how they're doing it. Because climate change is bullshit in the first place. It is agenda. It is the nonsense of ranting fools who have degrees from colleges who were taught by other liberal radicals. But what I find hilarious about this is the self-same day that they all joined together in this universal international treaty against climate change, aka global warming, is that self-same day it snowed in Egypt for the first time in 112 years. What idiots! Do you know what a hot, humid, arid climate Egypt has? And it snowed there for the first time in 112 years. You know, our Father sure does have a wonderful sense of humor, and he uses it to confound idiots. Now, since I'm making this short, I'm going to leave you with a few verses here to mull over, and I want you to think about them. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. Wherefore the Lord said, For as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart, that is to say, their mind, far from me, their fear towards me is taught by precept of men. In other words, by man's infinite wisdom. Man's infinite wisdom is now telling us how we ought to fear God, and they're telling us what we should do and what is right and just and humanitarian by their ignorance, which again is agenda. Verse 14. Therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. For the wisdom of their wise men shall perish. Hey, done. And the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. Hid how? Well, you could say hid from them, depending on the use of the word prudent here, but probably what this means is the understanding of their actual intelligent men shall be hid. Hid how? By agenda, by double standard, by censorship, by the media, by politicians. Now, let's go to 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Now again, just mull those verses over. They kind of speak for themselves, but God will not be mocked. God reveals wisdom to those that ask for it, and he reveals the stupidity and folly of man in his own ways and through his word. But anyway, since I am limited to 15 minutes, I'm going to cut this short right here and say what I always say at the end of these talks. Stay in our Father's Word, my beautiful brothers and sisters. Use the tools afforded us to study our Father's Word. Study in the Hebrew, study in the Greek, learn the manners of speech. And before you study, pray to our Father for guidance and wisdom and understanding, because he will give it to you. And always pray for those that walk in darkness. They are, after all, the ones that need it the most. May God bless you, and thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.